these possibilities within reason itself, right, which in a sense are guaranteed to us in all the gestures that you spoke of, whether one speaks of Nietzsche or Heidegger or Hegel and so on, or let's say Hegel, Nietzsche, Heidegger. In all those possibilities, and you know that Heidegger was a very close reader of Hegel and Nietzsche, in all those possibilities, the question, I think, arises as to whether, for once, instead of entering into the self-narrative of negativity, one can actually imagine something else emerging from that. Right? Because in some sense, all these ideas and notions, and especially the idea of asceticism, the idea of self-abnegation, the idea of renunciation, retreat, have all, in a sense, been worked into something like a structure of ressentiment. That is to say, they have been pushed to the limit of a certain kind of cynicism, whereby it is very, as you say, it is precisely the task of this kind of thinking, the kind of thinking that Prasanta is speaking of, to actually try and uncover something else there. In a situation where there is a thorough and complete compromise, I mean, all these notions, in a sense, have been utterly and severely compromised, so that you can no longer speak the language of. One of the astonishing things is that in the middle of in the 1930s, when Heidegger wrote the big book called Contributions, he actually says that German idealism is equal to Christianity. Right? So even German idealism, right, is in a sense amenable to precisely the kind of the work of ressentiment, whereby there is this internal gnawing of the soul, which in a sense auto-destructs. Right? If, and of course, by Christianity doesn't mean historical Christianity. In that sense, what are the possibilities? And so therefore I was thinking that perhaps following certain moves in psychoanalysis, I'm thinking of Abraham Torok, one could actually enter into a certain kind of cryptology. I'm also very inspired by the work of Leo Strauss, who unfortunately got a bad name in the US because one of his backbenchers joined Bush's kitchen cabinet. But the fact is that Leo Strauss is one of the most profound philosophers of the secret.
When you talked about the museum, you said that, let's say, for something new to happen in art, or in the point that even to talk about the new is to introduce the new. Now the point is the artist, right, and I'm speaking entirely from the perspective of the artist, moves in, moves out of the museum. So do you think, first of all, first question, that there is a museum which has a curator as well, right? So there is a curator, there is a museum. So can the artist himself somehow usurp that place? That's the first question. The second is usurp the place of the curator. So in the sense that of that particular space. The second thing that I possibly needed some clarity on is that when it comes to, let's say, the artist moving, right, that movement in and out. Now the point is, when you go in and take something out, in a sense there's a ground covered, right? Now that a certain ground is being covered, and in a sense that the new will possibly be instituted somewhere else, as in away from the museum, right? Along with a certain freedom of movement to move away from that museum. So when you talked about modernity versus, let's say, postmodernity, and where we are going to take forward, like even your point about difference was something that really sort of was fascinating, because when you talk about difference, like it's not like repeating the same, right? It's eternal return of the different. Now the point is, how do you reconcile this particular freedom? I mean, with modernity and postmodernity, I mean, is it that the freedom is changing? Is it that we are less shackled? Or, I mean, how do you see, let's say, that this divide between modernity as well, as opposed to a postmodernity? And of course, alongside the question of the new, the artist curator as well. So, I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me try to do my best. So, to begin with, when we are speaking about museum, we are not speaking about a particular museum. We are speaking about the idea of museum. And I would say that the best word for it will be enclosure, the collection, it can be on the website, or it can be something that is in our head, is something that we see as the history, as something which was done. And that possibility doesn't matter whether the artist, means if the artist is curating, and now it's a very common practice, which it's very interesting to think about it from this perspective, but it doesn't matter, it's still an enclosure which is created so by the artist curator or by the curator artist. So in that way, this is not the problem. What I think that this kind of enclosure for Groys gives a certain possibility of the new to emerge. My feeling is that this kind of new is very artificial. That means that the obsession of, the modern obsession with the new, in a way, forgot what is actually the meaning of being new. The new as such is as I was trying to show in the first part, the new is always in relation to something else. So if I'm trying to say something new about the new, it's not because of the new as such, but because I want to add a certain meaning into the discourse. So you mentioned something else, which is freedom. And it's another modernist myth, which is problematic. So in a way, we cannot get rid of it, exactly like the new. But at the same time, if we concentrate on freedom or on the new, at a certain point we are getting stuck. So to put it in a very extreme way, I'm saying that contemporary art does or should, it doesn't matter, but renounce the idea of the new and renounce the idea of freedom, if you wish, in order to be really free, in order to be really new. So we need to look for, or I think that contemporary art is looking for a different center. And that center is not necessarily to be alive, as Groys is claiming, but actually as being meaningful, as in a certain way, the aesthetic plays of composition, material, and so on and so forth is somehow exhausted. It's not exhausted because we reach a certain conclusion, but because at a certain point we realize that there is a certain emptiness inside. So now from a personal perspective, yeah, you're going in and out the museum, any museum, and you are collecting, and you are seeing, and you are thinking about your life and about the problems that you see around you, and you try to use many visual languages in order to bring up something. So the poets, they do it all the time, I think, and the novelists, they do it all the time, and there is no reason, in theater as well, and so on and so forth, there is no reason for visual art to be that particular field in which the new should come again and again, and if somebody did cubism, so we should go to abstract expressionism, and abstract expressionism is not enough, so we need to go for 3D art or minimal art, and then it's not, so on and so forth. That's not the point. I think that it was that naivety of modern art was a fascinating phase, and I think we are the people who are benefiting from that mess or whatever happened there.
In fact, my point was just that metaphorical. I mean, in the sense that the artist becoming the curator, not of an actual museum, but instead of one museum, the problem of there being several museums.
Yeah.
And possibly another thing that I wanted to ask you about was that when, let's say, a modernist comes up with a manifesto, in a sense, he is or she is announcing the new. So, do you think we have really moved away from that? I mean, in a sense, that are we still moving away from that? I mean, I know it's a difficult question.
Well, I don't know. But to begin with, I don't know. The only things that I'm speaking in first person, as somebody who is participating and thinking about what he's doing. So, to begin with, you don't see so many manifestos nowadays. And manifesto, yes, you're right. It's also it's about being new. One thing. Second thing that you see in manifesto is a certain truth. That there is a certain truth in art or in a certain art practice which seems nobody rejected nowadays because it seems so strange. It seems so naive. There is nothing true about art. Art is a discourse and it's a social practice that we all emerge in and we are working. It's full of meaning because of that, but it's definitely something which is constructed. So, but I think it's interesting what you are saying about the artist as curator in the actual work of collecting, and also in the way of curating or installing his own show. So what part of my practice as an artist is installation, and many of the installation is connected to ready-made. And the main thing about the work is about installing it. So the work, some of my works will totally lose their meaning if I'm not going to install them in a certain way. So this is one curatorial practice that I'm doing as an artist. In the same way, I think that the concept, which was, the curator was supposed to write about the artist or about the group of artists, is something that many artists nowadays take in their hand because there is no other way. If you're working with concept, you are the ones that need to explain himself, herself to a certain extent. So, yeah, so I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I want to ask a question to you. Since you are a practicing artist as well, when we talk about crisis in humanity, what's your personal take on it? That the questions of arts and aesthetics, don't you think that they are now being reduced to a kind of to some sort of a curatorial knowledge and museology? Do you think that is a reflection of that this construction? Is that a reflection of the crisis, or do you think that's how the things actually be? Now that the high point of modernism is gone.
Is it curatorial practices become so powerful that museums are dictating what is going to be seen in shows and so on?
And the way the institutions are structured, including institutions of teaching and learning.
So you have the institution where you study art, and you have the galleries which shows you art, and you have the collectors which are controlling the museums and all that. I don't know if it is part of this, I don't know if it is a crisis which is coming from modernity and from aesthetics and from internal problems of art and representation and so on and so forth, and if it's not connected to something larger which is connected to capital, that the way I see it. What is the benefit of our practice nowadays is actually is a way of coming out from this problem, successfully or not. What I mean to say is that if modern art was very naive, and again I'm generalizing again and again, I hope you will excuse, I guess you get what I'm saying. So if modern art was very naive in its regard to the society, that they thought that they will create something which is pure art, detached from what is happening around. Whatever the artist is doing is a pure expression of his, I don't know what, emotion, beliefs in aesthetics. And now, since I guess the 60s and the 70s, artists start speaking about the social structures that actually produce the work and influence the work. And so in that way, the way in which artists work nowadays, it's a way of trying at least to come out of the problem of the institutes and everything. Though I think what we see is it becoming more and more and more powerful.
Stop here and on there.
Is he on focus?
Thanks for the very stimulating. I just wanted to ask about the sort of parallel ideas of newness that one got when one heard everyone speak today. Newness as a fragment of fiction, and the way Milind and Prasanta spoke of between capitalist modernity and what it may exist outside its limits, what open and secret, and between domination and fragility. And on the other hand, what Rakesh spoke about newness as recognition of coherence. So my question really is, what are the cognitive ways of accessing culture outside capitalist modernity? I know you spoke about stars, but otherwise, how do we access culture outside capitalist modernity, and acts as secret. Yeah.
Is there a question to?
To Milind, largely to Prasanta and to Rakesh, newness as fragment and also newness as recognition. So sort of, very different.
I think you are, I also have a similar sense of hearing for the first time.
Yeah.
My sense was that, but I was talking about minimal, maybe slightly different from Milind, but we are sort of coming from one sort of angle. And then asking the question of political, Milind is using the word secret, I am using the word minimal, but from there moving on to the question of questioning itself about the idea of the passing humanities to the social domain. I mean, that is a concern I think Asad raised and Anzi too, in a way. Whereas I agree with you. Rakesh's point, it's such a complex paper, so many things, and yet he was trying to say again and again that you have to go back to the word and then recover if possible. So, and Achia's use of the word meaning again and again and again, the word meaning, seems to me that after his critique of modernism as a movement and postmodernism, to where we have nihilism of a kind, therefore a return of meaning can only be called new. Which I thought was sort of in a different way tying up with Rakesh. So I'm not giving an answer. I'm just thinking about what